This year, TYT's been making a lot of moves. Now you can too. Now, how are you going to do that? You want to launch a new business? That sounds fun. You're going to change careers? Geez, and Lord mercy. You're going to need a website for all that. Lucky for you, Squarespace also making moves. You're going to go to squarespace.com/TYT. You're going to get 10% off your first purchase, and you're going to get to build anything you want on that website with a unique domain. What are you, crazy? Go do it now. Go.
Hey, Young Turks, I'm Nomiki Konst. We have a special guest today. You may know former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich's videos, which go viral on Facebook all the time, especially during the campaign season of 2016. He would do these explainer videos about the economy and the rise of income inequality, mirroring the messaging that Bernie Sanders was relaying through the campaign. Our audience is very familiar with that. Well, he has a film out now. It's on Netflix called Saving Capitalism, and the director of the film, Jacob Kornbluth, is with us today from Berkeley. Jacob is known for he won an Emmy for Years of Living Dangerously, and he's known for the film Inequality for All, and of course Saving Capitalism, and his company is Inequality Media. Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you had an earthquake.
Thanks for having me. I survived. I think I'm in one piece, so I'm glad to be here.
And I'm warm inside, you know, hiding from snowpocalypse outside right now. So, I guess the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you get to know Robert Reich? How did this start?
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up all those videos that were part of the campaign. Well, I made those videos, and I've been working with Robert Reich starting on short videos in about 2008. It was right after the economic collapse. I picked up a camera and started making videos with Robert Reich, and I found that those videos had an audience. We made some about the battle for a public option in the healthcare system, and some of early sort of explainers that were less straight advocacy and more about trying to help people understand what was happening. And I found that there was a real audience for those videos, and those videos grew into Inequality for All, my first feature film collaboration with Reich, which was at Sundance in 2013 and released, unfortunately, by the Weinstein Company in 2013. But and then we sort of doubled down on sort of trying to explain complex economic issues in ways everybody can understand, and founded Inequality Media together, Reich and I, and those videos sort of evolved in sort of one long story from Inequality for All through all these short videos to Saving Capitalism. So I see Saving Capitalism and my collaboration with Reich as sort of an 8-year story that we've been telling using video to try to explain what I think is one of the most unique economic times that I've seen historically for America, and try to give some real context about how we got into this mess and hopefully some ideas about how we can get out of it.
Why is it called Saving Capitalism?
It's interesting. People on the left hate the title because they think, why does capitalism need saving? And people on the right hate the title because why would you have to save capitalism? It's so perfect. So it sort of puts everybody off the title in a way. But I think it's actually the perfect title because it's not about the ism. It's not about capitalism. It's about trying to understand an economic system as a set of rules and figuring out who do those rules benefit and who do they hurt. Mm-hmm. So many people get swept up in if capitalism is better than socialism, or if communism is better or worse than capitalism or socialism. And the real story is there's a set of rules that make an economic system up. There's no free market. Every market is based on rules. Who do those rules benefit and who do they hurt? So over the last 40 years, what we have seen in America is that those rules increasingly benefit the wealthy, big corporations, and a very small set of people, and increasingly don't help out the middle class and sort of regular people across the country. So when you get past the ism and you get to the real story, that's when Saving Capitalism makes sense.
We've gone through these periods before. I mean, you had the robber barons, and now we're going through this capitalist bubble. I don't know what you would call it, where income inequality is so vast and monopolies are predominant. I mean, you see it with net neutrality now being reversed. It's a perfect example. But is there a moment?
And the tax bill.
And the tax bill, of course, the tax bill. Uh, you said 40 years ago. I've been doing a lot of reporting globally, with the Labor Party and interviewing these movements globally, talking about the rise of neoliberalism and comparing that to what's happening at home. 40 years ago, was there like a moment when people got into a room and said, all right, we're going hard on capitalism and this is how we're going to push back against these populists? What led to that 40-year mark?
40 years is actually maybe the wrong set of years. It's sort of a rough area. But in the film, in Saving Capitalism, we point to a memo, the Powell memo, that was written by a future Supreme Court Justice, Lewis Powell, that sort of advocated for big business to take a much more active role in government, essentially. I think that was 1971. So it took a few years to sort of percolate through, but what you see is the rise of globalization and technological change happening in the early 70s, which is what a lot of people point to as the sort of dividing line when economic inequality started to widen. But beyond that, you see businesses and wealthy individuals start to advocate for changes in rules that benefit them much more around this memo. So we sort of put that line in there, 1971 as sort of a starting point. I don't know if you can point to any one thing. As usual, it's much more complex than that. But this is an interesting point and an interesting moment because what it focuses on is the sense that this change, this widening economic inequality as a product of globalization and technological change was not inevitable. It didn't have to happen that way, that it was a set of rules pushed by people that changed the economic system in a way that benefited the wealthy and hurt the middle class. Once you understand that this wasn't inevitable, that this was a sense of businesses really changing the way they operated within government, that's helps clarify the story, but also give you a sense that the economy isn't like the weather. It doesn't just happen to us. We can change it. And if we changed it for the worse, then we can take our economy back.
Was there something happening with unions then? I mean, you'd think that the natural opposition would be unions in the 70s, but they were much stronger than they are now. Why were big businesses and these wealthy individuals so successful in infiltrating our government's policies?
Well, why were they so successful? I think because they were focused on changing it rule by rule and bit by bit, and it's been a sustained effort over a number of years. It's true that we show an inequality for all, and again, we see it in Saving Capitalism, and I think it's sort of well known that the decline of unions mirrors the decline of the middle class, that you can line those graphs up over each other, and they look exactly the same, as union membership was in the sort of mid-30s in the 60s, which was high enough so that even if you weren't in a union, you got the benefit of the union bargaining across a spectrum if you're in, say, the auto industry. Mm-hmm. And now it's about 7% for the overall workforce. So it's declined, a lot. And we've seen that decline mirror the decline of the middle class over time. And if you lay the decline of the middle class and the decline of unions graphs over one another, they exactly mirror each other. And we have exactly that picture in inequality for all. So unions have played a role. Now, the question is, were unions gutted by globalization and technological change, or were they gutted by corporations that were advocating for rule changes against unions? And what you see is that the decline in unions was much larger because of the influence of big business. And that in a place like Germany, for instance, which has a much higher union participation, they also have much smaller economic inequality across the economy, and in generally speaking are growing at a faster clip than we are in America. So that this change happened, it wasn't inevitable, and it was in some way the product of a rule-by-rule change of the economic system over a large period of time.
You hear this often from centrists saying that when there was the debate over TPP, whether or not TPP, this was during the campaign, should be favored by Democrats or not, and there was a big divide within the party over that. But you'd hear some centrists say, well, there's really no reversing what happened in the late 70s, all these trade policies into the 90s and 2000s, that there's no reversing it, that you're not going to bring back all the jobs, that unions have been crushed, so you might as well just acclimate and deal with it. And that's one of the arguments we heard for TPP. Is there any sort of recovery for unions? I mean, is there turning back?
Yeah, I mean, the world doesn't go in reverse. Everything goes forward. So we don't go back to the good old days. But what we do is we see that there's vast areas within the economy that are not outsourceable, that are not, exportable jobs, that are in the service sector, that are vast swaths of the economy that are not unionized properly. And, the economy changed over those times, and globalization and technological change had a real impact. And there's no question that it's not the same as it was in the 50s or 60s, and to try to kind of go back to that era is a fool's errand. But it's certainly true that there are vast swaths of the economy that can be unionizable. And the danger of that argument that you just laid out is that this change was inevitable, that it had to happen, that it in some ways just happened to us and there was nothing we could do about it. And that's not true. And it also takes away agency from people to change it going forward. So what we really try to lay out in Saving Capitalism is rule by rule how the economic system changed to benefit the rich, which should frustrate you and make you angry, but then also give you a sense that if they can change the rules in that direction, we can change the rules back.
So we can change the rules back, but you're fighting monopolies. You're fighting AT&T, Time Warner, Pepsi-Cola. I mean, the list goes on and on. These major companies that own the marketplace globally. How on earth are you, even if we do have this populist wave and a bunch of democratic socialists get elected to Congress overnight by some sort of miraculous move, you still have to fight. I mean, these are still human beings, and it's one thing to run on these policies, but once you're in Congress and you see how the sausage is made and the lobbyists are showing up and, the human element comes in, and that's essentially what happened 40 years ago, right? How can you fight these big monopolies and win these policies over?
Well, it's going to be very hard is what is the usual sort of disclaimer for all this. But the best reason to believe that we can do it now is that we've done it before. If you go back and we look at it in Saving Capitalism, if you go back to the Gilded Age, the robber barons of the late 1880s, 1890s, conditions were terrible, and people couldn't see a way out of it. Well, we had a progressive era that started in 1900. Teddy Roosevelt, a very wealthy a very wealthy guy, sort of saw that this was a danger, not just to the economic long-term future of America, but also to the democracy of America. And we had a series of rules that changed over time: the 40-hour work week, the no child labor law, childs weren't allowed to exploit children in working conditions, things like that sort of changed. Slowly, one rule at a time, over, say, a period of from 1900 to about 1914, and again picked up, in the kind of, after the Great Depression in the 1930 or so. So the only thing that I can say that gives me hope, or one of the things that I say that gives me hope, is that we've done it before, that we've been through very dark periods in American history when capitalism has essentially gone off the rails, and we've gotten that capitalism, that economic system, whatever you want to call it, back on the rails before. It's been this bad before, and we've fixed it. And we've faced down strongman dictator types in America, and we've gotten rid of them and toyed with this kind of extremist leadership before, and we've gone to genuine positive social change every time in America. My hope is we do it again. We're at an incredibly dangerous time in America. Everybody knows it. This sense of Donald Trump being a kind of unstable strongman dictator in the kind of model of something you might see in Latin America in previous years, or in dangerous, what we associate with dangerous parts across the globe, is real. This is that unnormal. He's that unstable. He's not a normal conservative, principled conservative, which I think I wouldn't personally vote for, but would be much happier with somebody like Mike Pence than this guy. So we can't normalize just how dangerous this time is and be Pollyannish about our ability to kind of fix the system. But we have to know that we've done it before so that we don't get too defeated. Because I think if we get too defeated, if we get too cynical, if there is this danger of people unplugging. You see this kind of mix with people on the left when They're some mix of the most energized that they've ever been in my lifetime, which is incredibly exciting, and in danger of sort of burning out because they feel like it's sort of out of their reach. So what you need, I think, is, what we tried to provide in a film like Saving Capitalism is, that kind of balanced historical look at that we've done this before, that it's not hopeless, but also that it's really scary time, because I think that's all true.
You are seeing a lot of people rise up in their communities and organize around specific issues, actionable issues, very attainable, reachable issues. And you have people who are running for local office that had no interest before running on these types of ideas. With that being said, it seems like there are some states that, not many, because Democrats don't have control of many states in the country right now, but there's a lot of states and cities who've been pushing back on Trump's policies. Do you see that maybe that's a pathway in the short term to push for stronger union laws? And Wisconsin, I'm off to Wisconsin next week, and I'm going to be covering some of the organizing that's happening in Wisconsin to push back against, the Paul Ryan, Ayn Rand policies that have been struck in a very strong union state. I mean, do you see that kind of as a path to victory in the short run?
Well, you see an incredible amount of energy being focused on a local and state level right now, and in very motivated people. I mean, the real story on a national level politically is that the energy is coming from this progressive pushback on a local and state level. That really is what's happening right now. I think, in broadly speaking, there's some real soul searching on both the Democratic Party level and on the Republican level, but on a kind of localized level, what you see is incredibly motivated citizens, more motivated than I've seen, in my lifetime, actually, sort of fighting for these kind of issues on a state and local level. I find that to be incredibly inspiring. I mean, I live in California, and, it's so easy to get, I guess, down cynical, I guess would be the word, because you sort of feel like you're in a blue state and nothing's, you can't affect the national discussion. But what you see is these incredible groups of indivisible or swing left or sister district. These sort of people are all so motivated to sort of change the system for the better. And it's weird. It's sort of like they can't take it anymore, if that makes any sense. Like they feel like they're just kind of had it, like they have to sort of do something and push back. That is when social change happens, right? I mean, it comes from these sort of outliers in Wisconsin and these outliers in Michigan that I've seen around the Flint area, and these, even people in all these blue states who are sort of more motivated to make the trip to places like Alabama and Wisconsin to sort of see what they can fix it. That's incredible and amazing and inspiring. I think you're absolutely right to hold those up as points of optimism. And I think that kind of energy feels like the strongest force in politics to me right now. It feels like the most interesting story. It's hard to cover in broad, terms because it hasn't quite changed the system. But my belief is that 2018 flips the House and maybe the Senate. I'm hopeful about that, and that I think we see a generational shift in 2020. The sort of extension of all of this energy leads to the presidential election of 2020. We get to rewrite all the census districts, unrig all the gerrymandered states, and you see a change in the face of America that will be reflected in the electorate in 2020. And I see a generational shift coming. So I'm excited about that, and I think we're at just the beginnings of that.
You mentioned generational shift, and that was actually my next question. Was for millennials, a lot of this stuff makes sense. They overwhelmingly identify as progressives. They're not signing up for the parties, but they are progressive in beliefs. And part of that, I think, is just because they've been the victims of the economy, which we're all very familiar with. But if you're a millennial and you're talking and you're going out there and campaigning and you're talking to maybe even, let's just say, party members, Democratic Party members that are older, from a different generation, who are still of this belief that it's the identity politics, for lack of a better term, and you don't talk about economics. How do you message to these people that when you talk about economics, it actually works for everybody and that it's the smartest path? What's the strong messaging that you would use and the advice that you would give people to go out there and eventually evangelize the message that you're putting out there in this film?
Well, first, I think that the story in Saving Capitalism, and firstly, I relate to a lot of those millennial perspectives. You know, a lot of them don't even identify as capitalists. They identify as socialist these days, or won't put that label on themselves, which I think is fascinating development. But and a lot of them have pushed back with me for the title of this film. But the story of Saving Capitalism is fundamentally about power. It's about an economic system that feels like it's bullying regular people, feels like it's bullying young people, feels like it's bullying the middle class, and that the game is rigged against them, right? So all of those things I will tell anybody, and this is the message of the film, are consistent across the political spectrum. People on the right who if you're a left-wing progressive, have virtually nothing in common with. People on the right also feel bullied. In the film, we talk to the second most conservative member by the way they rate these things in the House of Representatives, David Brad, a Tea Party conservative, and found a lot to agree with him about in terms of crony capitalism, the rigging of the system, the sense that sort of, the economic system has stopped working rule by rule for regular people. This is consistent. This is not a left-wing issue or a right-wing issue. It's not just a progressive point of view. It's not frankly, a millennial point of view. A lot of people feel that. What you see from establishment Democrats and from establishment Republicans, frankly, is this sense that there's a status quo for which the system is bought and paid for by these wealthy corporations and wealthy individuals that we can't shake up, that we can't mess with, because that's just the way the game is played. And I think that story is going to change very quickly. I think we're seeing sort of wholesale rejection of that by not just millennials, but a lot of other people. And it's not politically specific. It's not just some marginalized progressive narrative. This is a story about, major change happening to the center of America. What you described as what you call centrist, I would be careful about how you use that language, honestly, because I feel like what the center believes, in my experience, having been across the country with Saving Capitalism and also having talked with a lot of people, is a broad frustration with an economic system that they feel has stopped working for them. And I feel like that shouldn't be called a progressive message or something on the margins. That's actually mainstream American thinking right now.
Jacob, fascinating conversation. I'm looking forward to highlighting more of your videos, because I know you guys aren't going to stop. You're always pushing them out. Where can people, other than the film, which is on Netflix, where can people find your work?
Well, inequalitymedia.org is where you can find the videos. The Robert Reich Facebook page is a great source. Robert Reich, just look at him on Facebook. And all of the videos that I make from Resistance Reports, we made 128 videos, I think, last year that were seen almost 300 million times as of now. So pretty frequent. We have about a video a week, so keep your eye out for.
That's fantastic. There's endless content, especially with this president.
Endless content. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
Great talking to you too.
If you like the interview that you just watched, I got great news for you. If you become a Young Turks member, you can watch them live as they happen. Only the members get that. You also get Young Turks live. You also get Aggressive Progressive live and Old School live. Everything is available for the members and commercial free. tytnetwork.com/join.